Story 1. I recently went through a medical abortion. Hello, I'm from British Columbia, Canada. I just want to share my experience with a medical abortion. This was the hardest decision in my life. I've never been pregnant before, and I've always been pretty open and supportive about body autonomy. So, this was a fairly easy decision for me to make, but after seeing my 8-week ultrasound and experiencing every pregnancy symptom, I had to take a few moments to think. My boyfriend was extremely supportive, as we're both in our early 20s and still working towards our future. He was with me through every single sick day, but the day that came down to taking the medication, I genuinely had a hard time. I kept looking back at my ultrasound picture and thought of the what if, but I know I can't provide a comfortable life just yet or risk mine. So I made the hard decision of taking the medication. On the first day of taking my mifepristone, I just had minor cramps and light spotting. On the second day after taking misoprostol, I only had to wait an hour for the bleeding to start. The pain was unimaginable. I've always had painful periods, but never like what I just experienced. It was so painful and uncomfortable, and the bleeding, it was so much. I soaked through 2 maxi overnight pads in under an hour. I had to sit on the toilet and just bleed there. After 3 hours, I was still bleeding far too much, and the clots were big and painful. The Tylenol 3 with codeine wasn't helping me as much. So I called the emergency room, and they said that if I kept on bleeding nonstop after the 4-hour mark and soaking more than 3 pads in under an hour, to call emergency or head to my nearest hospital with the help of someone. I can't remember when I slept or fainted, but when I woke up, my bleeding had calmed down, so I decided to just sleep through the night. It's the next morning now, and the pain and bleeding is a lot less, thank goodness. But it was such a horrible and scary situation. I never want to experience this pain again or mourn the loss of something that could have grown to be like me. I see a lot of people who are opposed to abortion say that we are heartless for our decisions, but it was genuinely such a hard choice to make. My heart hurts, and so does my body, and I think I'll forever mourn this loss. Story 2. My experience with a medical abortion from Planned Parenthood. So I want to preface this by saying that my experience doesn't mean yours will be like this, because I know some people's experiences weren't that bad, but some were horrible. I read a ton of Reddit posts about it, and I was really scared. So I went to the Planned Parenthood with my boyfriend, and I just went to the front desk and was like, I have an appointment for an abortion pill. And she gave me a form to fill out. YK, typical name, address, emergency contact stuff. I took it back to her and paid the fee, which was a little less than $500 without insurance in SoCal. Then I officially checked in on a little iPad thing. A couple minutes later, a nurse called me in and weighed me, then gave me a cup to pee in. She took me to a room with the ultrasound chair, asked me a bunch of questions, and did the transvaginal ultrasound. Then I had to watch an informational video while I waited for the actual doctor. Nothing scary. The doctor came in and asked me basically the same questions that the nurse did and explained all the side effects of the pill, had me sign more forms, and told me exactly what times and in what order I would take the pills. Don't worry if you have a bad memory, because they write it all down in a little packet that they later give back to you. Right before I left, I took the first pill, mifepristone, right in front of her at 9:30 a.m. and left with my packet and my medications. The entire appointment probably took like 30 minutes max. Now for the next day, I'm just going to write in time markers because it's kind of a lot to put into paragraphs. 8:30 a.m., started eating and preparing my room. Prepping or section, laying towels down, putting my food closer to my bed, getting more water bottles, putting on a pad, getting a puke bucket. 9 a.m. Took nausea and pain meds. 9:30 a.m. Put misoprostol in my cheek pockets, harder than I expected. 9:45 a.m. Light cramping is starting 10 a.m. Why can I feel it in my foot? Like someone is just poking me. I thought the pills were going to be dissolved now, but they feel like wads of gauze. My cheeks kind of hurt after washing them down 10:25 a.m. Threw up having some of the worst cramps of my life. Dizzy. Feel like I'm going to pass out. I don't usually have bad cramps at all, and I'm pretty small, so it might not be as bad for you if you're used to heavy cramping. 11:30 a.m. Woke up from a nap and nothing hurts anymore. Fell back asleep 1:30 p.m. Woke up to some light cramping, took the second round of pills, and went back to sleep 4 p.m. Woke up laying on my side and immediately felt blood pouring down my leg and onto the towels and birthed the largest blood clot I've ever seen. But the cramps are basically gone. I did this all by myself because my family doesn't know that I was pregnant and my boyfriend is at work. I also did it without a heating pad because I was scared my mom would ask why I needed it if I asked where the heating pad was. So if I can do it alone and without a heating pad, you can too. Just make sure to keep drinking water and eating occasionally, or else you can't take more pain medications. Story 3. Medical abortion has been the most intense pain I have ever experienced. Hi all, I'm posting to describe my experiences. I felt there wasn't a lot of light on how painful this is. I'm currently 5 hours into misoprostol and just got done with the most gut-wrenching contractions about an hour ago. I found out I was pregnant a few weeks ago. I am currently 7 weeks pregnant. according to the first day of my last period. I don't have health insurance, so I was never able to make an appointment with the obstetrics and gynecology. I also just moved, so I don't even have a primary care physician, regardless of my insurance status at the moment. I found out I was pregnant before I missed my period, and my boyfriend and I decided it would be best to abort as we're simply not ready. I took the first pill yesterday and misoprostol around noon 1. I fell asleep and woke up to light cramping. Then, as the pain grew, I locked myself in the bathroom for an hour, having the worst cramping contractions I have ever experienced. I sat on the toilet and just pushed. It felt like I was pooping, which I did do many times. I threw up once. I was sweating and twisting and turning on the bathroom floor when I wasn't pushing on the toilet. I felt a plop in the toilet and felt immediate relief. I have no idea if I passed the embryo or what, as I believe I'm a little too early to really tell. I just saw a small blood clot. I'm writing this from my bed that I managed to crawl back into, and luckily I have my boyfriend here for support. I feel bad for him having to hear my crying and groaning in the bathroom for an hour. I feel so exhausted, and I'm hoping the worst of it is over. I knew it was going to hurt a bit, but I never imagined it would be this excruciating. Oddly enough, I am not bleeding much. At least, not yet. Edit. I've been laying in bed for about 4 hours now. Constant mild cramping. I'm bleeding quite a bit, but it's not noticeable until I stand up or use the restroom. I'm the same way on my normal periods. I don't tend to show blood in a pad if I have been laying down. Gravity and all. I am very relieved that the worst is over, or seems to be edit 24 hours after the worst. I'm relieved. I woke up happy and I feel like myself again. Still bleeding and having some cramps coming and going. I feel good, but not, let's go for a walk. Good. Story 4. At-home medical abortion. My experience and what to expect. Warning, gory details. With much of the world still in varying degrees of lockdown due to COVID-19, the UK and other countries are making at-home abortion more freely available to women. Rather than having to visit a clinic in person to be scanned and receive the pills, women in the first 9 weeks of pregnancy are being assessed by phone and may either collect the pills or have them sent to their homes. This is an absolute win in my book. Making safe at-home termination more freely available is an amazing response to the difficulties of providing medical care during lockdown. Unless you've had the procedure, you may not know what to expect. I consider myself reasonably educated on sexual health, but there were still a lot of surprises. Your healthcare provider should give you a very exciting stack of leaflets to help familiarize you with the process. But I wanted to give a more personal account of the process. Whether your experience is easy, difficult, painful, or scary, you are not alone. Warning. The medical leaflets use somewhat euphemistic lingo, largely about masses and clots, in describing the process. I go into a bit more graphic detail, which I expect some folks may find gross or upsetting. Also, I'm based in England, so your experience with ease of access may differ. I got pregnant in December 2019. My boyfriend and I had unprotected sex, and the morning after the pill had failed, I didn't know at the time that the risk of it failing is increased if you're overweight, which I am. As soon as my period was late, I was pretty sure what was up, especially since I got immediate and utterly horrible morning sickness. I knew that if I wasn't pregnant, then there was something else very much the matter with me. The fatigue, nausea, and general hormone overload were miserable and were made worse by my first bout of what I describe as gender dysphoria. I consider myself a queer woman, but the immediacy and biological femaleness of pregnancy was a fresh and unexpected bit of body horror. My sense of taste and smell were heightened to the degree that it felt like I could smell every fart on a bus and every shampoo used by every person on my crowded commuter train. I never actually threw up, but felt like I was going almost 24/7. The only physical effect that I still feel several months later is that during and post-pregnancy, my nipples are much more sensitive. From my own research, I felt that a surgical abortion would be more comfortable for me. However, even though I was very early in my pregnancy and visited my GP as soon as possible, the UK NHS is a creaking institution slowly being chewed away by funding cuts. As such, the earliest surgical appointment I could get was over a month away. There was no way I was going to wait that long feeling so gross. So I made an appointment for a medical abortion 2 weeks later. Even that ended up being too long to wait. After a few days, I called the clinic, who were very sympathetic, and they found me a slot that had opened up due to a cancellation at 8:30 the next morning, 2 towns away. Luckily, my boss was understanding and my boyfriend had the time to drive me there and look after me. The clinic visit took about 4 hours overall. There were various steps to go through. The nurse checked my blood pressure, checked that I was safe and not being pressured into terminating, gave me an ultrasound over the belly and I didn't have to look at the screen or be told the sex, and then talked me through how to take the pills and what would happen. The first pill I swallowed there and then had to wait 24 hours to take the next medication at home. The first pill, mifepristone, is a progesterone blocker, which basically tells your body that you're not pregnant anymore. I felt better, less nauseous, within hours of taking it, which was a surprise. The second batch of pills, misoprostol, is taken vaginally. You gotta push the small-ass pills right up close to your cervix so they don't fall out and then sit quietly while they do their thing. They can also be taken orally if it's necessary, but it's very slightly less effective. This is the stage where pain management becomes necessary. On the nurse's advice, I took the maximum dose of over-the-counter ibuprofen, codeine, and paracetamol. I also put a hot water bottle against my back. Not according to her advice, I also smoked weed and tried to disassociate by playing video games. It still hurts like hell, not gonna lie. Misoprostol causes the placenta to detach from the womb and be expelled by bringing on contractions. For me, it was less painful than reports I've had of childbirth, but more painful than normal periods. Some of the pain was quite scary because it felt less like the rolling ache of a cramp and more like a stabbing pain in my uterus. After a couple of hours of bleeding, the contractions reached their peak. I felt feverish and faint and threw up. At this point, I felt a strong urge to push, but also felt like the muscles in my belly and back were made of water. In hindsight, I feel like this was the point when the placenta detached, because about an hour later, I had one big contraction and felt a mass squeeze out of my vagina and into my underwear. I was wearing a giant nighttime pad, luckily. I had been told to look out for this. It's the placenta and fetus passing, and it's very important that they do. The mass was about the size and shape of a deflated lemon and looked very recognizably like a placenta, only small. I'm not surprised it hurt so much squeezing through my cervix. There was probably a fetus in there, but I didn't look for it. Once it had passed, I felt immediately better. Kind of like when you throw up and feel 900x better afterwards. After weeks of finding all tastes and smells revolting, I devoured half the pan of brownies my boyfriend had made for my recovery in one evening. I didn't have sex for 4 weeks afterwards. The recommended minimum is 2 weeks, depending on how you're feeling, and lightly bled for about 6 to 8 weeks afterwards. Overall, not an experience I'd care to revisit. I don't regret it at all. I only regret letting myself get pregnant and having to go through the ordeal. I'm sure there are other women going through the same thing, possibly alone in lockdown, and that's going to be a shitty time. I hope you all are staying safe and know you'll get through it.